So for Learning Unit 6, it's looking at the public sphere, and it's from a theorist by the name of Jürgen Habermas. And why this is important is one of your questions in your POE is based on this idea or this concept of the public sphere. So even though this is a concept that is from a long time ago, as in it's based on like the bourgeoisie era, this is a relatively new theory compared to some of the others you guys are doing. Hey, Karen, awesome. It always helps. See those ice tasks? I try to choose the ones that help, but they are, I know, super long. But the whole idea is that we, as the media, or the media sits in this public sphere, all right? And the public sphere all originated from, like I said, the bourgeoisie area, where people were starting to talk about things that were happening and actually starting to have opinions, have a say on what was going on, and it was the elite of society. And what the media, how it all fits in, is that it's in that public sphere, having that connection between state and people. So the media falls within the public sphere, educating us and being that link between. And the public sphere is very important because it's the space where we as society feel comfortable communicating. So back in the day, it would be people talking in coffee houses and beer houses, and it's where the people within society that actually had a voice, so those that actually had money and status, it was their voices that were being heard. And they were the ones actually speaking up and going, well, actually, I don't quite agree with what the king is doing here, or I don't think that the church should be doing that. And it's that we had this space in which society were coming together to communicate about events that were happening around them and actually feeling that they had enough power to speak out against those that were above them. And it is actually super important, because if we didn't have the public sphere as it was back then, we wouldn't have the arena for communication as we see it today. So it's basically, we go through these three stages where in the beginning it was the family that was headed by the father. So he was the one that always spoke up and was the representative of that family. Then we started to have this literary public sphere and this space where people could start to critique society. And then where we see now, it's the public sphere is a place where we actually are able to rebel and speak up and have protests and try to find a common voice. But what do you guys think? Do you think that we in society, we can kind of come to a common understanding, or do you think we're too divided, too broken as a society? Do you think this idea of a public sphere is realistic? At times, yeah. I mean, if we look at us through COVID, we were pretty good, and we, you know, had this common view of we've got to protect one another, stand up for one another, and there was this mostly this space of respect for one another. But obviously, there were also those who were very against COVID and the regulations, saying, it's all just made up hogwash and what's being said is absolute rubbish. And it's that within our society, we have the ability and we have the freedom to speak up. But it's always those people with power. So even though we have things like social media today, which is a very good representation of our current public sphere, so even though we have the social media, the people that are commenting and the people that actually are speaking up within within the public sphere are those with social media, which mean those that have connectivity and those that have devices. So it's those that have access to those things. So again, we're hearing the views and we're hearing the voices of people within society that have, not those that don't. So a great example of something that's happening at the moment. Have you guys heard of Prime, the drink that hit the South African shores? I don't know if either of you have tried it. Okay, so exactly, it's utter rubbish. It is, yeah. It's that most all my friends that have got older kids that are 9 to like 16 are the ones that are, getting uh, gaslit by this whole trend. And it's amazing that we have this scenario that this drink, which I know we have the hydration one and there's the caffeine based one and all that. There we go, Karen. It's that it tastes horrible. It's filled with junk, but it was flying off the shelves. Checkers couldn't keep up with stock demand. You were only allowed to buy 8 time. Um, there you go. It's that even though as a product it's actually not really great, but it has all this hype due to 2 influencers. Yes, it isn't recommended for children under 18. That is right. So the fact that these 2 people can have that much sway within our public sphere that convinces whole generations to buy a drink that doesn't taste good is actually mind blowing because it's not, and they're expensive. They're like, what, 40 Rand a bottle? They're not cheap. So again, it's those that have the connectivity, have the control. Um, was 400 Rand a bottle or 400 Rand for like a pack of them? Ah, so what? That's insane. So just using that, oh, before Checkers, yeah, when people were importing it. So just that one little incident that's happened within our media at the moment, we can see how a small elite group of people can have this massive influence over a whole generation. I mean, even when vitamin water was a thing of my generation, um, it at least tasted good, for one. It was, even though it was basically drinking sugar water, it still tasted good, but it didn't have that same hype because social media wasn't as big as it is now. But it's that we have these aspects of society where we can have our public sphere used for good, so such as our protests for gender-based violence, Black Lives Matter, all that kind of thing. So we can actually see the public sphere working for the good of society and helping us to speak out about against the injustices of the world. Or we can see how the public sphere is actually used as a means of manipulation of society. Because the only reason why Prime has the hype it does is our social media. And then, this person who buys it and that then this celebrity who endorses it and that celebrity that endorses it. And then, we start seeing these trends following through society. And to actually think of our public sphere, what we have to think about is that there is this public sphere, this existence of the public sphere occurs when there's tension between the ideal of what we think society should be like and the reality of what is actually happening. So we think things should be one way, or we've been promised things to be one way, and then reality happens, and then we actually go, that's not okay. So whether it be, I mean, look at us with load shedding at the moment. I don't even know what we are today, stage 6. Um, I think that's where we were. I mean, it's going up to stage 9 now. And they're projecting that it could go up to stage 9, where we're having 4.5 hours at a time being cut off with an hour in between. our public sphere is the place where we should be standing up and going, this isn't okay, this isn't enough. This we are not succeeding. What is going on? But why do you think we as South Africans don't do that? Why don't we stand up against like load shedding in our public sphere? What do you think the reasoning behind that is? Why do you think we don't actually? Yeah, okay. We've actually become so disillusioned that we like, well, what's the point? There's too much corruption. Doesn't matter what we say or do, nothing's going to make a change. So sometimes our public sphere doesn't have enough sway to actually create change within society. And what's important for us to realize is that the more disillusioned we get, the less we speak out within this public sphere. And as South Africans, we just kind of accept and move on. And we just like, oh, well, what will be, will be. There's no point fighting it. But then other places, such as the US, the UK, parts of Europe, and all that, when they aren't okay with something, they make it themselves heard. I mean, they actually fight until they are heard. Sometimes they are heard by those within power. Other times they just carry on fighting in the hopes that they'll be heard. So the public sphere is not perfect. It's not always the greatest thing to actually fix all the issues within society. But the problem is that if we don't speak up, we do end up just accepting things. And like I said, as South Africans, we tend to just shut down and shut up, which becomes problematic. But when when Habermas was actually thinking about the public sphere, there actually started to become a decline of the public sphere. People started to criticize it and go, well, not enough change is happening for it to actually be worthwhile. And then there started to be the criticism of Habermas, saying that he wasn't taking enough of society into account, that it is very elitist and it's looking at issues that don't affect everyone. And it's basically that they saw this as a false consciousness, because the media basically pushes the viewpoint they want us to see. So if they want us to see a particular group of people as being the saviors and the fixers of all things, that's how we'll see them. If the media decides that a particular group of people is evil or wrong, that's how the media will portray them. And we see that like within our films, and we see it with our magazines and what have you. Certain ways of life and certain perspectives are pushed constantly, like the traditional American 2.4 kids, white picket fences, big homes. That means you've made it within society. We start to see everything from the perspectives of those who have the power and the money and the support. And it's that the public sphere doesn't necessarily always help those that are seen as either less than, I say that with air quotes as if you guys can see me, or the people that don't have a big enough voice. So we see a lot of racial groups and ethnicities sidelined because they don't have enough power and control. All right. Is this making some sense about Habermas, guys? I feel like I'm rambling. Okay, cool. All right. The other thing that was important with Habermas. Oh, awesome. Okay. I've read through this section in the textbook so many times, so I try to break it down so that it is a bit more manageable. All right. So what they say is that we need to look at, the 4 stages of Habermas's work to understand where things actually all fit in. So the first is human relations are intersubjective. So it depends on how we interact with one another. The next stage is the critique of technology and science. So it's that we start to push those boundaries, start to critique our environment, critique the manner in which we engage. Then there is the interest in pragmatism and hermeneutics, so where we just look things at face value and we accept events as they happen, and that there's certain timeframes in which they happen, and we don't see things as grey. We see things more black and white. And then the fourth stage is this reconstruction of the critical theory, going, actually, we need to think about this and actually break down and reevaluate how this theory actually plays within society. And one of the most important things that we see is democracy. So democracy gives us this environment where the public sphere should be heightened, because we as society have the right to speak up and have views, and we actually able to see our world and fight against the things we disagree with. So when we look at our democracy models, we have our liberal, which is the people that are pro-abortion, pro-choice, pro-human rights. They very open. Then we have our Republican, who are more structured. It's almost like the liberals would be like our Democrats of the states. Republicans are more conservative. They like to follow rules. They like to follow set guidelines. They're more structured in their approach to democracy. So it's democracy to a certain point. And then we have the deliberative, which is where Habermas actually like to sit, and saying that there's important parts from liberal and Republican that should be taken into consideration to make this perfect democracy. And what's important is that we should never just accept things at face value. We should deliberate, we should discuss, we should analyze. And to just say that you fall into one of these, one or the other, it's not the best way of looking at things, because a friend of mine and I often have these discussions, because she's more Republican in her approach, I'm more liberal in my approach. And what we were talking about this week, actually, we were saying how it's better to have bits of both and see the strengths of each, see the weaknesses of each, and almost come up with our own perspectives rather than just following a particular viewpoint. Because, I mean, if we look at the States and we look at what happened with, I mean, whoever thought Donald Trump was going to be in power? But it wasn't because of Donald Trump necessarily. It was that people were anti Obama and the stuff that had happened with Obama and recession and everything. So they're just like, well, we'll just go the other way. And Trump is a good public speaker, so people voted for him. And people felt that their votes wouldn't make a difference. And we saw how voting can make a difference in the case of the States. All right. The other thing, or the other point that we need to raise, is looking at our considered public opinions. All right. And what this is that we need to think about our public sphere and how it's structured, and that we generally have a political system in the center of our public sphere and where our public opinions lie. And then what we have is the people that basically have power over us, control over us. And then we have the periphery, which is your media, your society, your social media, the smaller political groups, commentaries, your news sites that give analysis and discussion and all that, our TV shows, our movies. And it's that we go from a central view out to the peripheral. And if our central if our center is not well maintained, like us in South Africa with all our corruption and everything, if that is not managed correctly, the rest of the public opinions don't really matter, because we're on the peripheral. We don't really have the power to do anything or say anything. And like we were saying with load shedding, we just come to accept. So the the more strength the political center has, and the least amount of corruption that there is, the better scenario it is for us to actually have a public opinion and for us to actually be able to speak up, be heard, and for change to occur. So when we're thinking of our public opinion, we've got three different areas that influence our views. It's your politicians and our political parties, our lobbyists and interest groups, so things like PETA, Greenpeace, those kind of guys, and then also our advocates, so people within law, our public interest groups, our churches, and our intellectuals. These three groups are the three areas or the three most significant groups that influence the way we see the world and interact with one another and how we actually look at what's going on around us. And they have the power. So again, if these three separate groups or these three areas are well maintained and looked after and are respected, then we're able to actually form public opinion based on truthful, accurate information. But as we know, it's not always the case. And we have people with their own agendas. We have whole churches that are, based on cults and mind washing, and not only churches but religions. And we have extremist groups like Al Qaeda and all that kind of thing. And our political parties, our country is just case in point with our political parties. Like, Malema can go and sing songs about shoot the Boer, but let the DA say something funny and, it turns into a whole big thing. EFF can go and trash all the H&Ms because of one misplaced advert, but don't let the ANC dare say anything against them because then, they're evil. It's just that we have these, we have a very tumultuous country, and it does mean our public opinion is not necessarily always accurate. People that are only getting one-sided media end up with spreading information which is false. I even had a friend today who said to me, no, she's pulling her child out of their school because they don't like the teacher. And instead of speaking to the principal and all that, this person is quite an extremist, not as close as we used to be, but they were like, no, if we'll just move schools. If the teacher's not good, we'll just move schools. And it's because she's been reading so much stuff about poor schooling and this and that. And I was like, just slow down, think about what you're saying, maybe speak to the principal first before just pulling your kid out of school and we're just going to homeschool and all this. I was like, just wait. And it's because the media that they're exposed to pushes these particular viewpoints of, oh, well, if you're not happy, just change. Don't try and rectify the situation. So after much calming down, she's like, okay, I'll go have a meeting. But it just showed me, I just said to you before, next month you're going to be hopping from school to school every term because you don't like what a teacher said. And I was just like, but I do know the type of media this person engages with is very narrow-minded, very one-sided, and I think that's why she speaks to me often about these things, because I teach media and journalism and what have you. So my view is that I always need to read as many different viewpoints as possible. Exactly. If you just run from the problem, no matter what school you go to, there's always going to be bad teachers. And you're also going to go to a school, every school is going to have great teachers. So it's just a small example that just shows you that if you're exposed to the wrong media all the time, that is the kind of attitudes that can develop, and that is what then filters into the public sphere, because she has money and influence and the ability to reach people through her social media, her church groups, her all of that. So it just shows you that those small little instances do have larger ramifications. All right, and then the last thing is just to think about our political communication. All right. And with Habermas, he said there was two things that are under threat in society today. and that's the independence of a self-regulated media system, saying there's too much outside stuff regulating the media, which I don't necessarily 100% agree with. I feel that there needs to be some external regulation to keep media in check, but there should be internal regulation as well. And then it's the right kind of relationship between media and civil society. We don't trust the media, and we really shouldn't trust the media, considering how much junk they throw at us all the time. I mean, how can we trust them when all the time we're getting stories that are either fake or misinformation, or they are not even approaching things in the best way. So it's really understandable that our relationship is so strained and ruined. And yeah, exactly. If we don't do the fact checking, chances are we're getting fake news half the time. And it's so scary because it's not everyone that knows they need to go and actually check the stuff. Um, and so a lot of people will spread fake news or misinformation because they just assume, oh, well, I saw it on News 24, so it must be right. No, most of our news agencies have no one fact checking the stories anymore. They just assume the journalists are putting out stories that are truthful and accurate because they don't want to pay for people to fact check the stories. And that's the sad reality of our media industry. Um, but the other thing is that what it says here, the political public sphere needs active citizens who voice society's problems and respond to the issues articulated in elite discourse. But we hear the voices of those people that speak the loudest, that leaves out big groups of people. Yes, Karen, WhatsApp community groups. Oh, my soul. They are shocking. And you wonder how these people, like, A, passed matric, B, some of them have, like, high paying, like, good jobs. And you wonder how these people, like, are spreading the stuff. And you just look at the post and you're like, oh, dear me. And I'm very critical because I don't spread fake news to me. Don't spread misinformation. I can verify stuff. If you send something to me, I'll verify it within about a minute. And I'll try to call you out on, what it is. But the thing is, that person's not going to go back to all the people they messaged and said, oh, sorry, my friend who, works within journalism and media verified this and it's actually fake. No, I'll say to them, oh, it's fake. And they'll go, oh, okay, cool. And then they leave it at that. And I'm going, and then by the end of it, people are believing absolute nonsense. So it's good to be skeptical of the media. Yeah, exactly. And then you're just going, well, oh well, there's nothing, because there's nothing you can do. You can't actually go and say, well, can you tell me all the people you've contacted? Because the chances are those are the people. It's like, pay it forward, the movie, where you're paying it forward with good acts of kindness and all that. No, this is paying it forward with, like, fake news. Because fake news spreads faster than accurate, truthful news. With all the coronation stuff that was happening this week, I can tell you, for every positive post about the coronation, there was probably about 5 about how Prince William's cheating on Kate, and his side chick's son was in the procession, and Prince Charles has done this and he's done that. It's just like, people never just leave things as they are. So we have to just take everything with a pinch of salt, make sure that we are always checking our stuff. That's why I always say find at least 3 sources that are saying the same thing, because then probably it's more accurate than not. But it's all about just being critical, so that when we are actually thinking about our media and thinking about this public sphere, that we don't fall victims to fake news, and that we don't think about the fact that it's only a small percentage of society whose voices are being heard. Okay. Right. Does that make some sense, guys? Has that helped a bit? Great. Okay. So we're going to end there now. We're going to end, yeah, we're going to end there now. And what we're going to do in our next collab, I'm going to go, yeah, it is much easier when we're just chatting about it. What we're going to do is I'm going to let you guys finish off Learning Unit 7. In our next collab, I'm going to then just speak to Learning Unit 7 a bit, and then we're going to break down the POE. Because I know you guys are still dealing with assignments and all that, so there's no point starting to break down the POE now, because chances are you're not going to actually be able to work on it just yet. So I don't want to jump the gun and stress you guys out even more. That is never my intention. So just for Learning Unit 7, when you are going through it, the focus of it is more just about how we use globalization and the media. So the whole thing of interconnectivity and all that. So what we looked at in Learning Unit 1 and 2 of journalism is what we're doing for the last learning unit of media studies. So just you need to know it from an overall perspective in terms of globalization and the media and how we basically all interconnected. So don't worry about the nitty gritty of the learning unit. And just for the sake of your POE, just to give you guys some guidance, because we're going to be looking at globalization as a whole. Okay. All right. All right. That's us for tonight then, guys.